Good afternoon, everyone, our dear guests, and welcome to the event Innovation and Investments for Defense, Deterrence and Security, Lithuanian Defense and Dual-Use Ecosystem event on the occasion of the NATO Summit in Vilnius. My name is Ramanauskas, and I'm the investment manager at CoInvest Capital. Together with Baltic Sandbox Ventures, INVEGA, ScaleWolf, and other partners that helped us to make this happen, we want to truly thank you for you attending here today. Let me introduce the program very briefly. Today we're going to hear many bright and very interesting speakers here on the stage, 2 panel discussions, also a short innovation showcase of the leading Lithuanian defense and dual-use startups. After the official part, I invite all of you to come back to the general area, enjoy some networking, snacks, and of course, some drinks. Without further ado, I want to invite on the stage the Vice Minister for Defense of the Republic of Lithuania, Ms. Greta Tučkutė.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here to open this event. And I would like to extend my special thanks to organizers. I think it's very timely and it's really great to meet for the community and to speak about investing into defense, investing into innovations, investing into dual use. And why is it so important? It's important, I will speak here from the Ministry of Defense perspective. And for us, it is highly important to have high quality, timely products in place when we need them. And I think it's possible to do that only when we have the whole ecosystem working together and all of the stakeholders being involved. And these stakeholders are 3 stakeholders. This is public sector, this is private sector, and this is academia. So when all of those 3 stakeholders are working together, there could be some good product in place that could be well used in the battlefield. And we have now Ukraine, unfortunately, the battlefield where all the innovations are in place, being used. And I think we need to learn a lot from Ukraine, how these innovations are being used and how people can be very innovative when their lives are at stake, when their state is at stake. So for us, for the community of defense, I think as for one of the stakeholders of the whole, this holy trinity that I listed already, it's highly important to see how we can participate in the whole process and to communicate well to the developers, to the private sector, what kind of product is expected from our side and what kind of product can be used by our armed forces. And I think it's very important that here we have people coming from Diana, from NATO Innovation Fund, and we are meeting now as we speak, at the moment of the NATO Summit that is starting. A crucial moment for our society, for our country, because here we are going to discuss how to boost the defense investments, how to boost the production in the defense, and how states, how members should encourage this production. And I think there are 3 important points that I would like to raise here. First, we need to have very well-balanced and very active international cooperation, because only by having a clear interoperability among countries, having dialogue among the countries, we can have the products that are stronger, that are more competitive, and that are competitive also with our potential adversaries. Secondly, we need to have a policy in place. policy that doesn't allow obstacles to stop the development of the defense industry, but that is sustaining the security and defense aspects in place. It means there must be a balance. We cannot, the defense industry is not a topic that, it's not an industry that can be released very easily and can compete in free market rules. The defense industry is something special that needs also to be regulated by the state, but at the same time, the obstacles that are artificial should be erased from the policy. And thirdly, as I mentioned before, I think Ukraine is a country that is important for us. It's our partner. We need to speak about Ukraine as well here, because only by helping Ukraine, we're helping ourselves. We're able to develop ourselves, and we're able to have a reliable partner that is potentially to become a member of the NATO and European Union, that is going to make us even stronger when the time comes. So thank you very much for your attention. I wish you great discussions and interesting debates. And thank you again, the organizers, to organizing this event. It's very timely. Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much, Greta. And I do hope that we stay strong all together and increase that cooperation in however ways that we can. Next, I want to give a word to the Vice Minister for Economy and Innovation of the Republic of Lithuania, Ms. Erika Kuročkina. Round of applause.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, distinguished representatives of the defense industry. I'm pleased to welcome you today at this event, which seeks to foster the dialogue and collaboration among the major stakeholders in the defense and security ecosystem, and of course, to showcase our Lithuanian defense industry. Well, first of all, I would like to express my deep thanks and admiration to the organizers of this event. I am proud that Lithuanian defense business ecosystem and startup ecosystem is not only very professional and creative, but it also positively stubborn, extremely ambitious, and result-oriented. For me, I as a Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation am calm, because with such strong community, I'm sure that there won't be any problems in this industry. This industry will be strong and will be thriving despite any political changes, any bureaucratic burdens. So thank you. Talking about Lithuanian defense industry. You know, at the moment, there is a huge window of opportunities in Lithuania for the development of defense industry. Our industry is growing. It consists of large companies, of small, medium-sized companies specialized in aerospace, in AI, unmanned platforms, optics, photonics, sensors, communications technologies, and etc. Our defense industry I characterize as open, very collaborative, and focused on emerging technologies. It aims not only to enhance Lithuanian defense capabilities, to contribute to NATO's collective defense efforts, to help and support Ukraine, but also it aims to drive economic growth through technological advancements. You know, I'm not a military person, but for me, defense industry is much more just military equipment. It is a branch of economy where the intellectual potential of a man can lead for the most unexpected discoveries. So thank you and welcome, and I wish you some discoveries about the Lithuanian defense industry. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Erika, and we're really happy to have you here today with us. Now we will jump straight to the panel discussions. And I want to invite on the stage the first panel's moderator, Lieutenant Colonel Valerijus Šerelis, the founder of the Military Affairs Institute, to present the topic and the panelists of the discussion. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I need innovation. The third hand, if I may. I was asked to provide a quote, and I put one. There is no revolution in military affairs. There are small revolutions which are making evolution of military affairs. So the first speaker of the panel, Professor Deep Chana, I hope I pronounced it correctly. He will be with us online. So, Chief Execution Officer of Diana, it's more than obvious. But he is currently as well high-level scientific advisor to the Ministry of Defense of United Kingdom. The next speaker will be Colonel Peter Nilsson, sorry. Colonel who started actually career from the private, from the conscript, went through all the levels of command up to brigade, and now in a few. Sir, I would like to invite you, and this chair is for you. The next one, Brian Rich. More than 25 years of experience in disruptive technologies, applied intelligence, and so on, so on, so on. So, as I remember the scheme, you are right here. The next speaker, we've been in the same places, Afghanistan, Iraq. I haven't been in North Africa. So basically, I would say this is an example like a practitioner goes in the field of the science. So if you would agree, I would like you to have closer to me. And one more speaker, Gedrimas Iglinskis, one of the few Lithuanian officers who graduated West Point, have degrees of Georgetown, Columbia, used to be vice minister in the Ministry of Defense, and used to be former assistant. It's written. I don't have to read what is written. Sir, floor is yours. Galime įjungti ekraną? Do you hear us? Because I would prefer to have all the panelists on the panel. Galima paskambinti? Okay, while we are waiting, I have to kill some time. The procedure will be that we will have at least 2 questions in the panel. And the panel will take 50 minutes. So if you could limit yourself to 5 minutes, would be nice. Because I would like to ask another question, or possibly, not really highly, but possibly a question for auditorium, but I would prefer a suggestion. If the panelists would like to ask a question to each other, it would be at the high level of expertise. So preferably question one to another. I have another question later. So sometimes we may misuse word innovation just by modernizing the things. In my humble opinion, it's linguistics. I would guess innovations in the past happened when we invented the wheel, domesticated horse, invented bow and arrows, dual use, basically everything. Then we created theory, firepower, movement, and protection. Then we have tank. Then we will have anti-tank. Then we have submarine. Then we have anti-submarine. Then we have plane. Then we have air defense. Then we have suppression of the enemy air defense. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle when innovation will have counter-innovation very quickly. And do we have a Mr. Professor? Not yet. Good. Then I will have to tell something else. Actually, technically, we think that innovations are technical thing. But technical without tactical usually don't really giving a benefit what we would like to expect. And a friend of us, yes. Gary. So I was permitted to start without Mr. Deepchan. That actually I am pretty sorry. So, and we will start answering the question which I'll ask in a second, counterclockwise. So you first, you second, you third, you the last. The second question, we will go in the opposite direction. So the idea is of this question, what we may need in the future. So, and you are free to say what the future may look like. Don't limit yourself in time and space. You can start with a bow and end with a mind reading, which leading a fleet of drones interceptors, which intercepting another drones and killing radars with the lasers, whatever. So the panel is named like what we might need for the ultimate success in the modern warfare. So what I say, ultimate success, it's obliterating. It's obliterating that he is not even thinking to start, because everything depends on will and the capability. And usually wills go with the capability. When there is no capability, will is not enough. I'm more about Russians, you know. So, question is what we may need, but what we may need. So, free play. Gedrimas. You are sitting on one. No, not you.
1-1. 1-1.
Good.
I see Deep is on.
Sorry, Mr. Deepchana, have you heard? Good afternoon. Have you heard our question?
I just caught it. It's lovely to join you. Hopefully you can hear me.
So the question is, how would you imagine the future armed conflict and what we may need for it? What we may need for it. And on this panel, you will be talking the third, so you may have a little bit time to think about it.
Okay, thank you.
So, and we are starting with Gedrimas. Gedrimas, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. This is such an incredible event at this special time for our country, not for our country, for the whole alliance. We have a very special 2 days ahead of us. Now, I'd like to kind of take a step back and think about, well, where are we as the democratic world, as democracies, as the alliance, really? And we are, although we are not at war, but Europe is at war We see, Russia that's, trying to obliterate a country that's defending itself very, very bravely and passionately. We see, obviously, on the other side of the world, China saber rattling. So this is a dangerous time to be alive. And for us, I think, and you introduced me very well. I had come from NATO. I finished my rotation, or my time at NATO as Assistant Secretary General about 6 months ago. And the things that we thought about is, well, how do we stay relevant? How do we maintain alliances' relevance? And a key element of alliances' relevance is our military supremacy. We need to have military power that's bigger, stronger, more impactful, more lethal than our adversaries. Now, how do we get there? And I think we realized that in the past 10 or so, maybe more years, the technology has been leaping forward. And a lot of that innovation was happening in the private sector, whether it's the AI or autonomy, big data, even quantum leaps that were taking place. And I think that was not really reaching our military. Our military, we were still kind of, I don't want to say stuck. Military is never stuck. It's a constant learning organization. I have a huge respect as a former officer to the military forces. But again, as a whole, I think we're sort of left behind a lot of the technological developments. So the question is, how do we not just encourage innovation, but also how do we adopt innovation? So my thesis that I was asked to provide a quote as well. So my quote was, well, Ukraine war is demonstrating to us very, very starkly that, that innovation adoption will be key to our capabilities. And innovation adoption in turn is really a function of a collaboration among the private sector, public sector, as well as academia. That we at NATO, we used to call it triple helix. Now, I think that, but also, so okay, how do you adopt it? But how do you fund it? I think here we have a lot of financiers. I'm a former banker myself. How do you finance these innovations to an extent by hopping over the valley of death? How do you encourage that innovation? I think U.S. has done a lot. UK has done a lot. A lot of countries doing things differently. But I think the question is how do we really fuel that innovation that would then find their way into capabilities, and from the capabilities actually to the battlefield. And I take the Vice Minister's Tučkutė's suggestion not to forget about a war in Ukraine. War in Ukraine should be on our minds, because it's not just a testing ground for our technologies. It also, we're learning a lot. A lot of companies are learning a lot. This is a key thing, and we want to learn and try to do something. And just to finish this, my spiel, my initial answer to your question, Valerijus. So this is exactly what happened at the very origins of NATO Innovation Fund. These are the questions that we've asked. Okay, how do we make sure that we don't stay behind our adversaries? And we know we need to fund the early stage funding, and that's where the whole €1 billion came about. But then, of course, there'll be other things at the next stage. How do we fund future generations? How do we hop over the valleys of death and so forth? But at the end of it, if we ensure access to finance, it's a good first step. Second step is, of course, collaboration among the private-public partnerships and academia. And I think we have great panelists. I know we have Deep here, and we have others who are already kind of in the middle of it. So I'll stop here, but, that's it. Thank you.
Great. Brian?
Sure. First of all, it's great to be here. Thank you. And I agree, this is a very kind of strategic moment in time. I think we all acknowledge that the stakes are very high in terms of the things that need to happen to defend not just territorially, but a lot of the fundamental dimensions of free and open societies are being threatened, and not just by military hardware, but by hybrid warfare below the threshold. My background is in journalism. I was a TV and radio producer, and I founded a company about 20 years ago doing pattern-based intelligence in traditional media reporting. And I remember going after 9/11 and kind of showing these patterns to the defense leaders in the US, and they were just kind of like, well, what does it mean? It's not intelligence, right? The bar for what was intelligence at that time was very high. And there wasn't this kind of culture of innovation funding, that partnership that Greta referred to between academia, industry, and defense. And so it's encouraging to see, I think the investments of Diana, the NATO Innovation Fund. In my experience supporting the US military and the US government with data science and AI over the last 10 years, the innovation is really important, the partnership with academia and scientific knowledge. But there's a whole lot of other things that need to go right in order to transition that innovation into an impact for the defense enterprise. There's a workforce modernization component that's very important. The culture is so critical to the success of adoption of innovation and the adaptation of innovation. And this is going to sound really boring, but the procurement of innovation is like a critical dimension. How do you buy AI? How are we going to buy generative AI? How are you going to shift responsibility from the enterprise to industry in those procurements? So I think as we look at the concept of innovation, it's very important to look at kind of the organizational process to take something from the lab and the scientific dimensions of innovation, but how do you really operationalize that within the enterprise? The last 2 years, I've spent a lot of time working in the space of geospatial intelligence. We're seeing a massive disruption in the latency, volume, and variety of data that's available. You're seeing satellite data in near real time. You can get cell phone and ad tech data in near real time. You can get IoT data in near real time. And the important thing is that most of the platforms and the tools and technologies to exploit all of that data already exist. It's important not to kind of duplicate and spend a lot of really critical funding on replicating solutions that have already been created. And so organizationally, I think a really important place to focus, especially for a defense enterprise, is how do we adopt and operationalize innovation? It's not, and it's going to change over time because of what you referenced. The sequence of evolution changes, and that puts different pressures on the organizations and the workforces within the defense enterprise. So it's an honor to be here, and this is a great discussion. Thank you.
Sorry. Now, Professor Tučkutė, floor is yours. Actually, screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The screen, I can see myself on there. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. If you could give me a thumbs up, that would help me to understand that you can hear me in the room. Excellent, fantastic. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here with you all. I mean, I've just been listening to the previous two speakers, and I'm not going to repeat much of what is said. I might just take a slightly different tack here, and that is the future of armed conflict. What might we need for it? Well, I'll tell you what I think we might need for it. We need to figure out optimal ways by which we might avoid it. This is the core principal vision, I would say, that or mission that we actually have. And if it's inescapable to be involved in armed conflict, we need the tools and the systems to be able to resolve those situations effectively, rapidly, and with minimal impact. And it's in these two areas that I think our science and technology investments need to be directed when we talk about a future posture for defense. And really, if we think about defense in this way, we're thinking about it in a very holistic terms. You know, how do we, as I said, make sure that we end up with low probability scenarios for conflict in the first place? And then once we're in conflicts and situations which will be unavoidable, in many cases in the decades coming, how do we resolve them with minimum damage? And so this is really where I think a vehicle like Diana fits, and it's the rationale for having something like Diana. And this is the game-changing proposition I think that we're trying to put forward into this space right now. Because if we look at the emerging and disruptive technologies of today, if we look at the interconnectedness of our world, if we look at the systemic issues and threats that we are facing as humanity that might drive conflict, such as climate change and associated risks like food insecurity, etc., we can clearly see that entering into conflict scenarios has a greater and greater risk in terms of impact for all of us. And so this is the reason for taking this particular posture. Maybe I'll leave my comments to that for the moment, and we can pick some of this up at the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Professor, very much. Peter?
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Even though I'm in uniform, I do not represent my own country, neither do I represent NATO. I represent myself as a uniformed, military, experienced, informed person who is also curious about what's going on here. I just arrived from the NATO Force Integration Unit, which is right now hosting the coordination of the security concept of the surrounding the Vilnius Summit. So it's to me it's the biggest military operation in peacetime that I have been just a very, very small part of. So a very interesting operation, and a lot of nations are contributing to this to make sure that it will be a safe summit in Lithuania. And then I'll speak no more of that. I'll also say that my intake or my speech on this will be open sources, of course, and non-classified things, and I'm a non-expert, so this is my general feeling about what's happening around the globe, and especially in Ukraine. So I think I might fit well in here because I would be a bit more specific on that than the previous speakers. For me to try to understand the future war, I divide it into 3 areas. So the first is the bits and bytes, the information war and the cyber war. The second piece for me is the tech war or the metal war, where machines will fight machines, and then the third part will be when all the machines are killed, then humans will start fighting humans again. This is not there's no watertight walls between these 3 for me, but it's not something that will happen or is happen or has happened now. Well, some of it has. We are in war right now in the information and in the cyber war. Right now, as we speak, Lithuania is under attack. Its critical infrastructure is under attack right now, in this moment, up to the summit. So this is a serious thing where I think there's a lot of issues to be dealt with and a lot of opportunities to strengthen this, both on a national level to make the nation resilient, but also to come with a lot of invention to support this. The technological thing is more, we're also seeing this, where drones is a good example on how that is being used in Ukraine. And we are seeing the beginning of the anti-drone war, so where machines will be hacking on machines until there are no more machines back. But this is just in the very beginning. And then there are still humans involved in this. We're seeing the clearing of minefields, the clearing of fortifications, Ukrainian infantry, just like the Roman legions are clearing the minefields, so they are still an important part of this. To mention a few areas where I think we can draw some lessons, I divide that up in 3, the non-kinetic, the kinetic, and then some specific issues at the end. So the non-kinetic, as I mentioned, the information warfare, I think we've seen that dominated on an unprecedented level during especially in the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where Ukraine was attacked, and also NATO allies' infrastructure was attacked by cyber attacks, and the information domain was also challenged. But luckily, that is one that we can say at least we have won initially, and I hope we will keep that also on our hands. The cyber war, I think also that we can say we won initially, but we still need to. It's contested still, and we need to be able to fight that. And in the information domain, I think the disinformation attacks that also Lithuania is being or is getting every day. Last brief I had from the Defense Ministry, the Strategic Communication Department, was 5,000 information attacks every year. So this is being conducted. So the disinformation analysis of news and the automation that can be put up to that, I think, is very important also to make the country or our countries as resilient as possible towards the Russian disinformation. So, and then, yeah, I could also talk about SOMI and how that has been used very much in Ukraine. I will not go into details on that. And also the big private companies that has been part of this, Google, Microsoft and Palantir has been really active in supporting Ukraine. The Starlink project, of course, also has given Ukraine the light provided for them when it was cut dark during the first days of the invasion. On the kinetic side, I would say, in principle, the war is being conducted as it has been for the last many years, but with an add-on of the new technologies that we see, which is changing nothing fundamentally, but on the other hand, the tactics and the strategies are being changed by the new add-on technologies. I'll take out the targeting issue here because it seems like the defense is getting an overhand in relation to the offense right now, and this might be because of the transparency that we see is being developed or being that can be used on the battlefield, where the combination of satellites, drones, and other technical equipment can see much more on the battlefield that we are used to, and if you can see it, you can kill it. So, but at the same time, that should, of course, be good for the attacker. But the one on defense can spread out and deploy in the depth, so he is not so vulnerable. But the attacker, when he needs to concentrate and penetrate the defense, he's vulnerable in this concentration where he can be attacked, and if he's seen. So this gives the defender and a good advantage. Then I'll just, you mentioned the EW, which is also, in my term, a kinetic, but not shooting, but it is disrupting the communications, it's disrupting radars, and it's also disrupting a GPS system, and it is disrupting our GPS system. Russia is using it, crossing borders to NATO countries, or has been doing it. Specifics, if I should use just a few words on this, I will also try not to limit your innovation and your use of your funds in this. It should be your creativity who should guide you in this. But as I understand, there is a very well-developed laser technology industry in Lithuania, and we're not really seeing a breakthrough on the battlefield with laser technology now, but this might be something that's coming up, especially in the fight against drones. This could be a very important area where I would just point in that direction. Also anti-missile, for instance. 3D printers has not really been mentioned, and I does not read about it that much. Also might not having a breakthrough yet. And also now we see the war being more a war of attrition. It might not be relevant, but when we build up our armies, the logistics will be enormous to support these armies. And 3D printing could support that by reducing the amount of logistics that we bring forward, at least in the future. And then off the shelf, of course, using civilian technology, modernizing that or changing it a bit is much more effective, much more cheap, much more fast than developing our own equipment. And then the link between the military civilian has been mentioned, procurement process and financing, I think, should be looked at also. I will stop here.
Thank you very much. Can you pass the mic to the Edward?
It's working?
Yes, please.
Right, I'm going to be controversial from the start. My prediction for the future is that government will remain very bad at predicting the future, and defence even worse because we move everyone on every 2 years to create that lack of continuity. The people who are better at creating the future are business, science, academia, the people who are focused on effectively productizing to a large degree in order to make money, to solve problems that we have. And that, I think, is the key focus, really, if we want to look at the future. is that we get better at articulating our problems. When we talk about areas of technology like artificial intelligence, I always give the example in the UK of being told that we were going to, as a military, do artificial intelligence. Well, it's not a verb. What do you want me to do? I'm not a data scientist. So actually getting our users with their problems closer to business, industry, scientists, academics who can elicit those problem sets. What's the problem we want to solve, rather than predicting the future and buying the technology we think is going to be the future. Let's solve the problems and let industry and academia and science actually look at the best solutions and the best ways to solve these problems. And I think that goes a long way to doing that. And more importantly, from a future perspective, it gives us the opportunity to allow business to do the horizon scanning to solve problems that we haven't even identified yet, because that's how they're going to make money. Key component of that, with making money, is also going to be investment. And what can government do, and what's government's role in this? Well, by and large, sometimes it's using public sector money to take the bets that the private sector capital isn't willing to take the risk on. But it's also incumbent on us to do two things, I think. One is break the procurement cycle that looks like a 5-yearly lead-in time to get technology. Technology moves far, far quicker than that, as we all know. Anyone who has to upgrade their mobile phone every 5 minutes will know that. And the other one is regulation. I increasingly see that the future is already here. Autonomy, maritime autonomy in particular for me, lots of other fields. This already exists, but it is hampered by the regulatory environment that we've created in all our nations that's based on, realistically, the 20th century, on things like that. And the more we can lower those barriers so that we can do experimentation, and I think this is where Ukraine has really held up a mirror to all of that. When you free people from those restrictions, everything happens quicker, better, faster. And I would argue with Ukraine, we've shown it can be cheaper as well. Yes, we need to absolutely provide governance to these things, but at the same time, we need to do it in a way that gives the maximum freedom of movement for these companies to be able to actually deploy their technologies. And then, for me, that really would be the best, fastest, most game-changing thing we could do to date.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry, Edward. Sorry. Probably I haven't mentioned that Colonel Nielsen have been deployed as well a couple times. And one of those couple things, Afghanistan, we have been all together in different times, but approximately the same place. I just wanted to reflect a little bit that civilian society in Lithuania actually using 3D printers to produce stabilizators for the drones, and later it goes to Ukraine and it drops somewhere when it's needed, so it's 40 millimeters from M203. And regarding information operations, what you said, Ukrainians closed all the Russian channels for Ukraine in 2014. So it means information warfare works only when it reaches target audience. If the information is not reaching target audience, so it just doesn't work. So, and talking about the future, of course, the best future is where there is no conflict. A friend of mine, he is actor in a certain, he says, in every play, there are 3 important things. Guess, scenario, and the scenario. Next question, because we do have a time, so I will ask the second question myself. Then you will think, do you want to ask each other? So the idea is that a friend of yours, the sir, the general, GFC Fuller, he wrote a book, The Foundation of Science of War. It's more than 100 years ago. Pretty nice book. When he is describing the 3 spheres of war, mental, moral, and physical. And the soldier, fighter, commander, he is in all 3 simultaneously. He understands, his morale is high, his will to fight strong, and he does have resources. So, and for technology, for use and the creating of new technologies, we will need specific people, specialists, technicians, commanders, organizers, and if the quantity is quality itself. So what type of people we would need in the future to operate the system of systems? And how to start, when to start to train them in the military academies of NATO and partners and allies. Because we like those busy words, MOEs, MOPs, measures of effectiveness, measures of performance, sounds strange. No, it's easy. Are we doing the right thing? And are we doing the thing right? So, question is, what type of people? To continue with creativity, to overplay, because if we have submarines, anti-submarines, artificial intelligence, counter-artificial intelligence, we may expect this as a future. So, people.
I think it's going to be very hard for us to recruit all the types of people in all the fields we talked about, whether it's autonomy, artificial intelligence. I think what we would ideally need to develop is a model that gives us far more flexibility so that people can come into government, out of government, into defence, into the private sector, into academia, and they can flow seamlessly between the two. The reality is we're still going to be recruiting people. We're always going to need that fallback option of the warfighter to conduct these operations. But at the same time, we need to bring in specialist expertise and then allow that expertise to go back into the sectors that allow them to be experts in the first place by doing that continuous development. You've got a piece of equipment here that's free space optics here by the side of the stage. That is fantastic, in terms of technology, unhackable, unjammable, high bandwidth comms. Our signalers will probably be able to do a lot with that. We could train them up to do maintenance, deploy it, that sort of thing. So the skill sets are broadly already there. Do they need to be experts in laser technology? Maybe, maybe not. Do they need to help develop the future of laser technology? Probably not. They just need to be able to articulate the challenges they've had on the battlefield or in deployed scenarios, and then allow the experts to come and go. We have in the UK the Defence Science and Technology Laboratories, about 4,000 scientists with deep understanding and expertise. We need to create that more of a revolving door that allows them to come in, data scientists, to come and say, what do you want? What's the problem you need solving? And I keep coming back to AI because it's great, because if someone asks me, what we want from AI, we all scratch our heads and say, well, could it shave an hour off my day? We never sit there and say, could it replace me completely? Is my job no longer required? So it's the data scientist that can sit down there and get it down into human terms that we can understand, and then we can translate that into actual physical effect in the battle space or wherever that needs to be. So I think our recruitment doesn't have to change drastically. We just need to increase the flexibility of who, what, where, and when we bring in when we need it. And that's probably all we need to do.
Thank you. Colonel?
Yeah, I'll just have to second that and add a few things. I'm totally agree on what you say. My own experience is that we are probably too bureaucratic, and so that would be my concern, that it still takes some time perhaps for us to realize the need for this flexibility between the military and the civilian world. I also believe we should bring, in this closer cooperation with the civilian world, we should bring them closer in and closer to the front. That might we need to train them so that they are capable to survive, but they need to be much closer to us and much closer deployed than we've seen previously. And then we need the flexibility of the commanders, of course, so we may need to make sure that in the military academies we train our future commanders with the flexibility in mind so that they can handle this. My concern here is also that it often, as at least my experience, it can be the bureaucratic political world might sometimes win over the more rational decisions between the military and the technological world. Yeah, we need many different people, so I would say with a flexible mind, and especially from the commanders also.
Thank you very much, Colonel. So I see on screen we already Professor Divchan, so please, screen is yours.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. I mean, the first thing I would say is that this particular conflict that we're seeing in Ukraine, this war is in fact, I would say, on many fronts, fundamentally different to anything that we've seen before. Right from the beginning, when you saw the huge use of social media, I mean, I think at one point this was called the TikTok war, right the way through to the way in which cybersecurity and cyber elements have played a major role in tactics and strategy, to the point now that we have got a large number of, or a very big influential private sector element coming in to help with the physical infrastructure for the war. These are all fundamentally novel aspects. And yes, we can say that the machinery, if you like, and some of the kinetic aspects are, similar to what has gone before. I saw a lot of stuff, and when the war first broke out, around, I think, commentators saying, "See, I told you so. Things aren't that different." And no one intelligent ever said that things were going to be massively different with cybersecurity or cyber elements, i.e., that the physical aspects would suddenly disappear. And anybody who suggested that, I think, was talking nonsense. Those things, of course, are going to continue to exist. But what we see is this complicated overlay and this interaction of novel technologies, novel infrastructure systems, all playing out in this war. And we see another thing too, and that is that the global ramifications of conflict are far more nuanced than people would have first imagined. Energy security has come into the mix, food security has come into the mix, the cost of living have been impacted in countries far away from the war. And so because of this interconnectivity, we see warfare having a far bigger and more nuanced impact than we have in the past. So that would be the first thing I would say there. Then on to this issue with respect to, I think, what some of the audience members have talked about in terms of talent. I couldn't agree any more than what I've heard. Talent is going to be hugely contested in the future, particularly technical talent. The kind of technologists that we want to attract into this multifaceted, complex warfare and conflict domain of the future, these are not the people that we currently have proliferated through our defense systems. I would have to say that. But these are the people that we want to see inside the systems in the future so that we are competitive, so that we can deal with the problem. That means that the defense mission has to be attractive. And that goes back to what I said previously, which is that you need a mission for defense, a next generation mission for defense that attracts the very talented to come into this space and to feel that there is something here of value to build and to work on. And to be perfectly blunt, I think the days of increased hegemonic power between one versus another, I think this is a very simplistic view of defense that we need to change. And if we manage to reimagine it, we have the opportunity, certainly amongst the alliance, to tap into a phenomenal amount of talent that will bring us the agility, the resilience, the inventiveness, the innovation that we want to be able to draw on in times of conflict so that we are more effective than anyone else. And during peacetime, we can build science and technology economies, which again are more effective than anyone else. And I think this is the aspect that I would like to highlight from what I've just heard.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, Brian, floor is yours.
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. Talent is a huge constraint, especially the ability to build native expertise within the defense enterprise. Industry's great, academia is great, but what's really important is that you have talent within defense enterprises that are capable of interpreting data, capable of making really fundamental strategic decisions about technology, adoption and adaptation. And industry can be great at fostering the innovation and creating the business model for evolutionary technologies. But what is a challenge is within highly compartmentalized military enterprises, how do you kind of bring that data into play organizationally? And you mentioned the concept of predictive intelligence. I've started to believe that really all you need to do is predict the present, because that's the only time you can make a decision. I've been involved also on the ground in providing, pattern-based and open source intelligence to, to a wide range of government customers. And often we are able to predict what's going to happen, but they organizationally are not able to respond to that prediction. It's a very unique dynamic, I think, compared to business or commercial enterprises, which take the data and are able to rapidly kind of start to mitigate or take decisions based on predictive information. The second dimension, which I think is very important, as you mentioned, scenarios. Scenario-based intelligence and event simulation is going to become more and more of an interesting dimension to how we plan and mitigate and understand conflict. And I think the tools and applications and data already exist. The latency, the volume, the variety, the specificity of data exists. But we're going to need to change how military organizations are kind of structured operationally to be able to get the most out of these advances. If we look at kind of the beginning of the Ukraine war, one very unique thing that happened is a major NATO partner started to declassify intelligence to help build an understanding that the invasion of Ukraine was inevitable. This wasn't something that was surprising. The data was there, the satellite imagery was there, the patterns of behavior were there, but the response wasn't necessarily, I think, what we would look back on and say was there. Although I think the declassification of that information really significantly helped. So I think there's a very interesting dynamic in how do you use data, and if you are able to predict or create scenario-based information and simulations that are accurate, how are they structured so that they're able to respond? I think that's a very challenging question when you've got these highly compartmentalized organizations. You mentioned the bureaucracy, but it's often just kind of the organizational structure of decision-making within the enterprise that is the biggest obstacle.
I think, well, I didn't want to talk about the jokes, but I don't know if you've seen Office Space, the movie, when two consultants, Bob and Bob, ask the person, so what do you do at this company? And he's like, I'm a people's person. So what do you do? And he's like, well, I have people skills. So anyway, it's not funny, but I think once it reminds me of some management consultants who write books and say, well, it's how do companies become from good to great? How they achieve that greatness? How do they become resilient and successful? At the end of the day, it's all about people. So it's again, I think we all agree here that people element is absolutely essential. And as technology progresses, I think you kind of realize that it's actually you need more people and more and better and smarter people and then actually the impact is much higher. So none of that do more with less, I think, which has sort of been permeating in our corporate world ever since the global financial crisis. At least we had that. Now, I think several things to kind of to wrap my head around is I think how do we ensure constant adaptation within the workforce? How can people grow? I think technology offers a lot of great opportunities to really get out of the comfort zone, really continue learning different skills, whether it's as Deep has mentioned, the technology talent, which is absolutely shallow space probably in our technology space, but also if you remember several years ago was all big push about coding. So let's have everybody code for girls, code for boys, code for kids, code for grandparents. Now I hear that AI will code for us. So I think the key is not to jump into that probably head first, but truly understand that this is it's a constant learning, constant education, self-education, self-re-education. That's essential. Now another aspect, two aspects I think is something that I mentioned before, something that Greta has mentioned in her opening speech: collaboration among sectors. In the military, and I know in our ministry, in my time, maybe it's different this time. It's hard to hire great talent. It is, because we're just a small country, and diversity simply within our ecosystem is not there. So I think the key here is really collaborating with private sector and academia, be able to bend those rules that kind of dictate how we hire, how we onboard our military and onboard these people from private sector, and there are ways to do this. Some countries have done it really well. The second thing, and I'll kind of finish here, is another element is institutions. We don't talk about institutions a lot, but once we set up institutions have to get it right. So it connects to the talent questions. You need great people in this institution, meaning the ministries, the military. The institution has to work with its own risk management and kind of innovative mandate. And how do you get innovation within these institutions? And it's extremely, extremely hard. In the military, it is hard, but it's everywhere. It's hard because bureaucracies don't tend to change. They're not incentivized to change. They're not incentivized to take those risks. It's less about risk avoidance than risk management. So I think, again, at the end of the day, it's all about people. And I think where we get to at the end of the day, it's really leadership. That's what's the overarching kind of umbrella. How do we get that leadership that really can inspire us to all be better, be adaptive, be flexible, and continue to learn? So, a very soft question, but very good question. Thank you, Valerijus.
Thank you very much. Before we jump to the questions, because we do have another 6 minutes. Fantastic timing, gentlemen. Even Professor, absolutely the best. It's the best, even better than the rest of the panel. To summarize, tactical level up flexibility of the commanders. Technical talent, inventiveness. Basically, we can put one more overarching word, what we have to teach and train our future leaders and commanders. Creativity. Technical, tactical, whatever you mention it. So it means you have to study poetry, music. Actually, music is, I'm a musician. The singer and songwriter. So basically, when you are writing a score, it's a plan. How you will execute the mission. So, and if panelists would like to ask something each other, just go ahead. If not, I will give a floor. Donatai? Neklausi, ne? Yeah. So then I will give a mic to the auditorium. Anyone? Professor, would you like to ask something?
I'm not sure I have a question. I just have a comment, which maybe I didn't get earlier on, but just to say that this idea of giving the talent of the future a stage on which to operate, giving them the opportunity to grow, flourish, and go from ideas to actual impact in a rapid way, that I know people wanted to hear what Diana is all about. That's what Diana is all about. Ensuring that our startups have that accelerator that gives them the kickstart, and then continued support through structures like the NATO Innovation Fund, which I know has got a rather auspicious day today. This is an engine of innovation that we're trying to build with this renewed vision of what defense and security is about. And to answer your first question, Chair, to address exactly what the first question was, which is this is what we need for the future of this kind of conflict space, if you like.
Thank you, Professor. So, the class, auditorium, anyone? Good. If you would like to drop last... Yeah. Sorry, Joni, прошу.
Edward, yes. I really like your thing about bringing the things to the user, right? Actually, we focus on the user. Why are we not doing that in Ukraine? Why does we do it to the Ukrainians?
Sorry,
why are we not doing that in Ukraine? The users are there. We are in Rzeszów, in Polish border, and we leave it to them. Good luck. Why is that not happening?
I think it is to a degree. I don't think that's happening necessarily. I don't think that's necessarily happening very publicly. But there is a large degree of, we know for a start there's a lot of businesses who've gone forward because they're unconstrained by policy and regulation on that side of things and politics. So there's companies on the front line, British, NATO partners, others, who are gathering that user feedback on an hourly basis and changing their technology accordingly. I think we're providing, as NATO, a lot of the engine in terms of the support to Ukraine and the partners. Why are we not getting the users? There are issues of geopolitics around that are possibly insurmountable on that side of things. However, I think we live in an age where it's easy to get information back from the front line very rapidly and do innovation and take all the sort of structures that we've built. Deep China's just been talking about what NATO is building for the future. We've got the Battle Lab in the UK. Every single frontline command in the UK has an innovation team or an innovation hub. And actually, how do we make them more relevant? Well, operations is always going to be the number one relevance on that. Ukraine is also a battle lab, let's be perfectly honest. You know, we're learning in real time. So it's in our interest as well to exploit that. It is happening. Does it need to happen better, faster? Absolutely. And then there's also the question around, which is mainly the reason for this event, is also how do we make defense and national security a more attractive arena so that we're not chasing solutions. You know, people are knocking on our door with solutions. And I think that there's certain challenges to that, some of which are administrative. You know, I've already talked about the procurement cycles on that side of things. But the title of this event is dual use technology. There is a reason for that. For companies to make money, they are going to have to be dual use. We are not going to build the next British Aerospace or Thales or Defence Prime. They're going to have to do two things. Some of that, Ukraine, there's other lessons to also be learned from Ukraine. Funds like Sandbox Ventures and others, I doubt 12 months ago whether they would have ever considered defence to be an ESG compliant sector. That has changed with the Ukraine war. Now that is a quantum leap in terms of what we're now doing. The morality side of things, all of this stuff has now gone. The technological you're talking about, absolutely. And that should be very easy to fix. I would argue that we're already doing a lot of that. The other challenge, which perhaps isn't being highlighted by Ukraine, but will be a challenge for us, is that the solutions are coming from small to medium enterprises. They generally don't sell a full stack solution. Defense and government is very good at buying full stack solutions. Actually, they provide a sliver of the solution, and we need to stitch all those solutions together in order to actually provide the effect that we want on the battlefield or elsewhere. You know, a drone company is not necessarily a GPS-denied environment company. It now needs to be both, or we need to connect the two. So yes, I think absolutely we need to do more of it, but I think we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much about what we are doing.
One. So it looks like we're pretty well accelerated. Just kind of on time. And talking about technical creativity. One of the officers sent me a Russian report on lessons learned. So actually, Russians find out that Ukrainians not sitting in a room, sitting in the corridors, but putting camera with a thermal night vision and observing the environment on the screen. So, and they're not visible. But later, so you have to adapt because it works once, twice, 2 months, and then don't. And there is a piece of poetry that actually the cadet, he was studying in a whatever country military academy, and they, all of them learned the standard patterns of operations, the school solutions. So it's a tombstone, and at a tombstone written, here lies the bones of Lieutenant Jones, the pride of the institution. He died on the night of his very first fight, trying to apply the school solution. Stay flexible and live longer. Applauses for the panel. Gedrimas, Brian, Peter, Professor, Edward, thank you very much.